Hello, this is Charles Brewer, President of the Civil War Study Group at Lake of the Woods, Virginia. Welcome to the recording of our program on July 22nd, 2022.
Good morning. Good morning, one and all. Thank you very much for coming. I'm Charles Brewer, President of the Civil War Study Group here at Lake of the Woods. Before introducing today's speaker, as I originally wrote this, but it turns out that we have speakers. We have a 2-for-1 deal. I'd like to mention a few items. Earlier this week, I sent out an email reminder about special programs next week being presented by Friends of Cedar Mountain Battlefield. I encourage you to visit the link in our website or in the email that I sent out to make your plans to participate. They have a lot of interesting things going on. And that pairs nicely with our August 26th program. Historian Mike Block will talk about the many implications of the Battle of Cedar Mountain, which is, as you probably know, over near Culpeper. It saw the emergence of the Federal Cavalry as an effective intelligence and screening force. It also provided Confederate Major General A.P. Hill's first opportunity to save the day and his first opportunity to raise Jackson's ire. And then also within the Federal Army, the aftermath of the battle escalated the infighting among generals and led to recriminations and finger-pointing over why the battle was fought in the first place. And then when you next check your email, you will see an email from me with details of a special August 11th Zoom presentation about concerns surrounding potential impacts on the wilderness battlefield area of the proposed wilderness crossing project. So if the email that you get has a link for you to share your email with us if you wish to view that program, and then once we get your email, we will, the week of the presentation, probably the Wednesday before, the day before, send out an email with the Zoom link up information to those who have signed up. All right, so thank you very much. Our speaker today is Bruce Doc Norton. The Doc is a very much earned honorific, as he served as a Navy hospital corpsman 2 tours in Vietnam from 1967 to 1972. I was also a corpsman during that same time period, but he did the real corpsman work. I was just stateside. After subsequently graduating from college 4 years later, he returned to serving his country, this time in the Marines. And his career, he retired, I think, in 1992 as a major. And he next served as director of the Marine Corps Command Museum in San Diego until 1997. For 8 years, he was tactical officer at the Citadel in South Carolina, then moved to Quantico to offer warfighting curriculum for Marines. He is currently on the faculty at the Marine Corps University at Quantico. And sharing the program with him today is his fellow author, Philip Gibbons, who will expand today's program to include Marine involvement at First Manassas. Doc will first talk about the Marines at Harpers Ferry, which is what I advertised, but you get the bonus of what's the nickname? Gibby? Gibby is going to talk about First Manassas. So with that, I hand the floor over to our speakers.
Right to it. The question we get asked is, why do we do a book? Why do we do a book about the Marines at Harpers Ferry and the Marines at First Manassas? And the answer is, we kind of wanted to set the record straight. There were a lot of things that were written that were correct, and a lot of things that were written that were incorrect. So what I wanted to do was briefly talk about the conditions of the Marine Corps in 1859. The Marine Corps was very, very small. And what were the roles of Marines in 1859? They were onboard ship, and they also manned coastal artillery pieces. Now, they didn't have a lot of, or any true Marine Corps infantry.
location. You can go across that area. If you ever want to follow the footsteps of the Marines, you can do that. The next day, 17 July, they make it to Fairfax Courthouse. The Federal Army does looting, burning of houses, those types of unprofessional things. We would not do that today, but it's a kind of an undisciplined army at this point still along the way. Now, I talked about Marines and how we do drill all the time, and how that plays into who we are. So when we go to recruit training today, we spend a tremendous amount of time drilling. Drill, drill, drill. It makes us feel good about ourselves, gives us self-discipline. We learn to work together as a team, all right? The Marine Battalion, every time they stop as they're marching for a 10-minute break, and everybody's like, all right, everybody take 10 and relax. The Marines start to drill. They go through the loading procedures of their muskets, and they practice going from column to line, all these different formations. The company officers are put in charge, hey, go do this. They're setting the recruits up for what's ahead of them. Some of the veteran officers know there's going to be stuff that's going on. The Marines are going to get scared. If we can teach them, focus on the drill, they'll be fine. Kind of like we're more terrified of our drill instructors than we are of anything else, so we do what they want us to do. So the Marines are drilling while everybody else is out getting in trouble. More Marines. These photographs were taken on the battlefield. I want to say during the 150th anniversary. This thing's back. Right there. It was very hot. It's going to be hot. They're out there this weekend. If you all want to go see them, I will not be there. But if you want to go see that, go out to the battlefield Saturday, and you will see those guys. I guarantee. This is Tom Williams right here, the guy I told you who provided so much research for us. That's Tom right here. He will be out here. Retired Marine as well. Okay, 18 July, they make it to Centerville. This is the Centerville Public Library where you have this placard at. You can go there if you like. It's in the, if you have a copy of the book, there's a stack right in the back of the book. It'll take you right to the spot. So they get into Centerville. This is where Baker, I told you the lieutenant that came out with the horse, this is where Baker actually links up with Reynolds at. And of course, what do you think the Marines are doing here at Centerville while the Army's getting together trying to come up with a plan?
Drilling?
Drill! Exactly. They're drilling. They're having fun. So a couple days later, they finally get the word, hey, we're going to march, and this is how we're going to move. So somebody came up with this wonderful plan to step off at 2 o'clock in the morning with this large amateur force. What a wonderful idea. I have a problem getting around my house in the dark, okay, with no lights on. I can imagine the command and control problems that you have in the dark with these armies. And the plan is, at least for the brigade that the Marines are with, that division, they're going to cross over Cub Run Bridge. And as soon as they cross over the bridge, they're going to make a right, go down this goat path, literally a goat path. The two brigades are going to split off on separate paths. They're going to cross over Cub Run Bridge, and they're going to both link up together back on the road in order. Easy, right? It does not work out that way at all.
Why did they split up?
It's a time and distance type thing. If you put everybody in line, say for example, we take all of us, and all right, everybody follow me, we're going to go out here, and we all go out the exit. So you guys go out that exit, you guys go out that exit, we'll meet in the center. It's just efficiency. The brigade commander that the Marines are assigned to realizes that the other regular battalions have regular troops that have served together. The militia units have units that have served together. The Marines have been together for 3 weeks, so we need to have something easy for them to do. So they go up to the Marine Battalion commander and say, hey, we got a great job for you. You're going to support Griffin's artillery battery. Shouldn't be in the thick of the fight. You just be there to support those guys. Wherever they go, you go. Easy enough, easy day. That's what we're going to do. Those who know the battle. How many here has been to the Manassas battlefield? Just about everybody. Perfect. I'll leverage that here in a second. This is the Cub Run Bridge crossing, the actual location where the Marines crossed. Lieutenant Hitchcock and I want to say it's Carter pause here to take a break as the Marines are crossing, and they talk to each other about, hey, if I die, would you please take care of our remains? They each promise each other that they'll do that. Here's the Marines crossing Cub Run Bridge, coming down here on the left. I don't know if y'all can see it. Oh.
Oops. It's the green button in the middle.
Is that the air? Is that the light?
That's the light, yes.
Oh, here we go. That's Sudley Church right there. They're familiar with Sudley Church, where it's at. There you go. So this is about 09:30 in the morning. They stepped off at what time? 02. And it's going to be a hot day. Just for reference, Henry House Hill down here. Here's Stone House. Matthews Hill is up here. Familiar with Second Manassas, there's Dogan House over there. The visitor center is about here someplace. Sudley Church period photograph. There's the Marines marching down. The lead elements are going to set up an artillery battery here, and the troops are going to start filing off to the east in a linear type formation. Still using linear tactics. Mass your troops on line. Level your muskets. Mass fire. You're not really aiming at a specific person because the smoothbore muskets are just not that accurate. For the most part, everybody's using smoothbore muskets, even though rifle technology is around. It's smoothbore muskets.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can you show with the pointer where the enemy was located?
Yes, sir. Here's the enemy. They're in red. Here's Stonehouse. You have a couple of artillery batteries and the initial Confederate forces. And you also, this is Stone Bridge, and here is the, I don't really want to say it's brigade, it's more like a regiment minus this down here. Now the overall plan, if you're not familiar with McDowell's plan, I'll jump up into operations just a little bit. The plan is for the Army in Northeastern Virginia to split. One force will come down through here, and another force is going to come around from Cub Run Bridge, come around here, so they're kind of doing a pincer movement because they believe the enemy is in this area here. The Confederates also have a plan that's somewhat similar. Yes, sir, question?
Are there colored blocks indicative of the size of the forces? So at this point, the Federals coming down over Cub Run are significantly larger than the the Confederates are?
His question is the size of the forces on here, is it commensurate with the troop numbers? Yes, that's something that Brian Wishner did for us. We also wanted to try and do as much visual as possible. So even if you look at the number of ticks here on the artillery pieces, that's how many tubes they had at that location. Okay, yes, sir. You had a question? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Matthews Hill. You can't really see our writing up here, but you can kind of see this is Stone House. This is just a photograph, so you kind of get an idea. And you can see the topography way up here. This is where some of the first Federal troops are going to line up. The 79th New York is going to line up in this area up here. Sudley Church is kind of up here. This is the modern day road intersection that we can all go through and be in that wonderful commuter traffic. There is this is taken from a Confederate battery position, and I can't remember the officer's name. A Confederate officer later on became a cavalry officer in Bowdoin. And Bowdoin's battery is up here on this hill. I want you to kind of remember this position up here and think about this spot right here. We'll go back on that in a few minutes. 10:45. Federal columns are splitting apart. The Confederate forces that were kind of set up to face Burnside Bridge have kind of turned and faced more toward the north, so they're shifting troops. You can just barely see the arrow over here of the initial diversionary attack by the Federals that's coming across the bridge. Here's Griffin's battery. Here's the Marine Battalion. Another 2 batteries. So you kind of see how the battle is starting to develop. Again, what's the mission of the Marines?
The artillery.
Support that artillery battery, right? First Marines are killed. So I showed you that high ground where Bowdoin's guns were sitting at. Doc and I believe it was in Bowdoin's guns that caused the first Marine casualties. They were trying to do counter battery fire. These guns are displacing at this point in time. Besides, they have all kinds of stuff going on in front of them. The Confederates are falling back, but Bowdoin's guns are still up here on the hill, in good position as well. They have smoothbore guns. The Federals have rifle guns. The rifle guns are firing at Bowdoin, and they're burrowing into the dirt in front of the gun battery. So Bowdoin's in a very good spot. So he's doing counter battery fire with Griffins and Ricketts. And that's where our first 3 Marines were killed. How do we know that is where the first 3 Marines were killed? Remember Baker? Baker writes about it in his letters that he splattered dirt and blood on his uniform of the Marines that are killed. 1 Marine has a leg shot off and 2 others are killed. 11 to 11:30 in the morning. So, this is the first time the Marines come under fire. So what are they relying on? Drill. So Captain Jones, who's in charge of B Company, he goes to his junior officer lieutenant and goes up to him. He stands boldly out in front of him like he's not afraid of anything. And he goes to the lieutenant and says, "Lieutenant, dress the company." So in the middle of all this chaos, he goes out there and has the Marines dress their line. I think that's just impressive that they had that much self-discipline to go and do that. So the Marines are now focusing on their officers, their drill instructors, right? And not so much the chaos that's going on in front. Because you can see, just standing there watching it, 3 guys have just been killed, and you can get wrapped up in it here real quick. Master Gunnery Sergeant Rich Judo again right here. Okay, the artillery moves to Henry Hill. I think everybody knows the story of this. About midday, the Confederates start to fall back to Henry House Hill. There's actually 2 Confederate armies that are fighting. They're showing up in this area, one led by Beauregard, the other led by Johnson. And they're starting to reshape the battlefield a little bit up on the Henry House Hill, going up, kind of falling back by terrain features. An old tactic, before we had rifle weapons, was to lead with your artillery. So you can get up there, put the artillery in, and just go blasting. The lead battery is not really sure what's going on, and as they go down the road, they're supposed to make a left and go up on Henry House Hill. They make a right, they make a mistake, so there's chaos right here, fog of war. But eventually, they go forward. Now, they go forward at the gallop. Any horse people here? Horses at a gallop move fast. What's the Marines' job? Stay with the artillery. So the Marines, at this point, Doc and I believe, they drop their packs, or not their packs, their bedrolls, leave them there, and they move forward because the bedrolls are hot, heavy. Like, we'll be back to get them anyway. The idea of being pushed off the ground is not even a thought. So they go forward. That's what they look like, arms to port. Marine Battalion, 11th New York. This is kind of how they come down and move. Now, those that have been on the ground out there, if you're standing where the Federal artillery gun line is, the initial gun line is this way, and eventually they're going to shift a section of guns. But in behind that is low ground, for those that have been there. When the Marines go forward, their officers don't just put them blindly up on top of the hill, they put them in the low ground so they can see what is going on. and officers will go forward and assess the situation. Now this is where, so Hitchcock, I get it, he's a lieutenant, and some of the other guys, Baker, they're lieutenants, but they're not like junior lieutenants. These guys have been lieutenants for several years. They're like professional officers. The only reason they're still lieutenant is because that is the company officer for the ship detachments. Basically, someone has to die in order to get promoted, right? So they go forward up by the gun line to see what's going on. There's the low ground. So Lieutenant Hitchcock and Baker, they go forward. Right? Baker's up in front of them, and Hitchcock makes a comment about the artillery fire that's going on. But they're up there to see what is going on so they can get situational awareness to figure out where to bring their troops up. All right? A section of Confederate artillery guns fire. Baker sees the fire coming, and he drops to the ground. Hitchcock's behind it. Doesn't have time to drop. And they're using a tactic called skip shot, where the round hits the, you can only do this with solid shot round artillery, smoothbore stuff. It hits the ground and it skips up, and it's very devastating because it goes right about waist high. Anyway, it takes Hitchcock's head off. In the second round, there's a staff NCO up there with him, tries to catch Hitchcock. Second round comes in and takes the arm off the staff NCO and nearly cuts Hitchcock's body in two. How do we know this?
Baker's letter.
There you go. He writes about it. Good on him. But I can only imagine where he's like, he sees something coming and he knows his buddy's behind him. Shouldn't he just say like duck or something? Maybe he wasn't thinking, but kind of. Anyway, we all have that one friend, right? Subtle. All right, we're going to try and fast forward just a little bit on this to save time. Everybody understands what flanking fire is, right? They take one section of Griffin's battery right here, and they send it around. Say you're the Confederate line. They send it around on the Confederate left, Confederate right. Put in-flight fire down on the guns. The problem is, in 1861, we do not have a uniform. Everybody knows the story, right? We don't have a uniform color of troops, right? The commander of this section of guns sees the Confederates coming. They aim in on them. A guy named Major Barry, staff officer, comes up and says, "Don't shoot those guys. That's your infantry support." They argue. Finally, the section commander says, "Okay." They turn the guns back. Lo and behold, that's the 33rd Virginia from Jackson's line. And so these guns are going to trade hands back and forth several times. To even make the chaos worse, Stewart's Cab's going to come in and ride right into these guys. So these guys in here, here's the 11th New York falling back, 14th Brooklyn, 1st Minnesota, and there is the Marine Battalion. So the Marine Battalion, they fall back off the hill. Yes, the Marines fell back. Why? Where is their flank support? It's gone. So the whole brigade, the whole line was falling. So they fell back into this area down here by the crossroads, and they'll reform. I just love that print, so I had to put it in there. Shameless print. And everybody knows this guy, right? Yeah. It's our guy from Harpers, Ferry, Jeff Stewart. Still wearing his federal uniform. During this fighting, we have more Marines killed, wounded. How do we know?
Baker's letter.
Baker. He's wounded. He talks about it. He is hit on the head. I can't remember if he's hit on the head with a saber or something. But basically, he's knocked out. He's not killed, but he's knocked out. He's knocked unconscious. Somebody gave him a water, I guess. So they're going to reform. 15:30 in the afternoon. Now, so the forward, back, forth, people are going to argue how many times that happens. It's really hard to tell. At least a couple of times. So the Marine Battalion is going to reform. We have the 14th Brooklyn, 79th New York, Marine Battalion, 11th New York. They're going to come forward. This is Jackson's line right here. This is keep in mind, these are still recruits, right? Of course, there's other action going on all over the field. You kind of read the story there, what happens. Again, I don't know how many times they went back and forth with this, but it more than a couple. So here's the neat piece that we'd love to talk about. When we have 300 recruits led by their drill instructors, okay? This is where the Marines, if you read about it, breaks Jackson's line. Like what? Nobody else in the entire Army penetrates that line any place other than the Marines. It is basically, they go forward in regiments, in column. The first unit takes a volley fire, they go to the ground. Maybe the 33rd or the guys that the Marines are going after are reloading, I'm not sure, but they don't stop. They're doing what they're told to do. So they advance. Here we see some of the other units that have fallen back and broken. Griffin's battery still changing hands. And there goes the Marines right between the 27th and the 2nd Virginia. You can walk that ground if you go out to the battlefield. It's still preserved. 1545, 1600 hours. So how do we know the Marines broke the line? Surgeon from the 2nd Virginia wrote about it. And again, we talked about that uniform. There we go. Blue coat, white trousers, white cross belts with a big old shiny brass plate in the center. Give everybody something to aim at. We all know how it ends up, right? Eventually, the Federals fall back off Henry House Hill. The Federals, regular battalion, will form square. Anybody here know what forming square is? When infantry forms square, why they do that? It's like a last-ditch defense that you have. We've all heard about different things with, not World War, but Zulu Wars, whatever, where they're forming square. It's usually a cavalry tactic to defend against cavalry. Once the cavalry gets in the square, they kind of get chewed up. So the Federals, regular battalion, form square. The Marines at this point are not a cohesive unit, but the Marines involved in that square. And they hold that square as the rest of the Federal Army falls back. Here's Stewart, here's the rest of the guys. You have the 10th Virginia and some of those folks in that element. So, how did the Marines do? How do we know that they did well other than just the surgeon's report? A fine military appearance. That's them out there forming on the battlefield, dressing. Here's our casualties: 44 killed, wounded, missing in action. Do I have a... I thought I had a disclaimer in there somewhere about our... There's Baker. I did. Lieutenant Baker. Because he's not on the reports. Well, he talks about he got smacked in the head. As he's falling, he comes to on Henry House Hill as everything's going to fall apart. I want to say it's his brother. I haven't looked at my notes in a while, but I'm pretty sure. His brother was in the cavalry battalion, rides by, sees his brother on the field, grabs his brother, throws him on the back of the horse, and takes him off the field. Commandant Harris is the first instance in recorded history where its members were forced to turn their backs to the enemy. Now, this line has haunted the Marine Corps for years. For years! With their backs to the enemy. That does not sound good, does it? Why did Commandant Harris say this? Those were his Marines, and he was angry. After everything's over, he goes back, and he's mad. He makes his public statement about this. You see it has quote marks on it, because there's more to it. It said, this is what happens when you put Marines under command of the Army. So And I'm summarizing. Of course, I'm picking on the Army a little bit, but that's okay. we're almost done. I love the Army. I spent 4 years in the Army before I decided to go be a Marine. Okay. Marines are still going to be used, but not under control of the Army. They'll be used in combined naval battalions, Fort Fisher, retaking Fort Sumter. There is Army troops there, but they're under the command of the Navy. Those that are familiar with Fort Fisher, the Marines did very well there, and it was ships detachments that came off ship, rowboats, never worked together before. They organize on land and they go forward because they all have that uniform training. We're so small, everybody knows each other. So during the 150th anniversary, finally we get a marker out there. That was done through private funds, not the National Park Service funds, which put in place. Gunnery Sergeant Tom Williams, there's the marker. Colonel Chris Bob, there's Colonel Chris Bob, and that's the Master Gunnery Sergeant Bruce Stewart. Both of them had just come back from overseas. Comparison between the two uniforms. Of course, I have to give Tom credit for helping us out with this stuff. So, and one final stick about the Marines' professionalism. So, as all the troops, we've all read about the troops falling back, going across Cub Run Bridge and in different places, and they just kind of stream back into D.C. and they go past Long Bridge. So, Commandant Harris, here's what's happened. Commandant Harris hops on his horse, rides out across Long Bridge, and stands there and waits for his Marines to come back. There's about 70 of them marching back. The rest of them are kind of to the winds with the rest of the Army. The only unit to march back into the city is those 70 U.S. Marines led by their commandant. So, I ask you, does this sound like a force of Marines that was defeated? I don't think so. I think they performed very well, and that's why we had that marker put in place. So,
Where's the marker?
So, all right, if you go out the front doors of the visitor center and make a left and head towards Judith Henry's house, just behind Judith Henry's house is where the marker is at. We believe that is the location kind of like where it kind of depicts where the Marines kind of set up at first. Again, we're talking 300 guys, so they have a little bit of a footprint, and they have them spread out in companies to support the different sections of artillery. So they're kind of spread out. Yes, sir?
Just a question about, go back to 1859, or even here we're dealing with recruits as your enlisted people. Were there career enlisted people in 1859, or the men who spent, did they have retirements? How did that work?
This question is, do we have career enlisted men? Do they have pensions? I can't talk to the specifics of the enlisted men, but pensions, officers had pensions, enlisted men did receive something if they did a certain amount, but I haven't done the research on it. But you had career privates that spent their entire time in as privates, so they might be a corporal. Promotions generally were set up based off of vacancies.
I'm just curious how that
Ken, do you know the answer?
Yeah.
There you go. Please.
In fact, the drummer O'Rourke I was telling you about, the fictitious drummer O'Rourke,
Yes.
stays in for 32 years and ends up in barracks and is given a small stipend. It's not a pension, it's a small stipend at his discharge, honorable discharge at the end. And found a number of long service and career privates.
Other, yes, ma'am.
Are the present-day Marines trained to work and fight on land?
Yes, we are. Every Marine. So the question is, our Marines today train to fight on land. So our mission changed. You see the mission of the Marine Corps evolve, I guess you see. We still have the primary mission, hey, seize and hold advanced naval landing bases. I got all that. That's why the 2030 planning guidance has us going back more to our amphibious roots, getting away from all the land fighting that we've been doing in the long war. So yes, though, we fight on land. Every Marine goes to Marine combat training, male and female. And then from there they go off to their basic MOSs. But every Marine, male and female, are basic riflemen, not basic infantrymen. An infantryman is a 0311, right? Professional infantryman. A rifleman is a basically trained rifle Marine. They can go and be employed in a provisional rifle squad or whatever the case might be. So, and I think the Army tried to model that a few years ago during the Long War because they were having some problems with other things. So, but I was a tanker in the Army for 4 years. I'm here to tell you I never touched an M16. I never did any infantry stuff. I did nothing but armor on tanks. And I go to the Marine Corps and it's like, oh my gosh, what in the world am I doing? Jumping out of windows and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Mean guys like Doc hollering at me, they're company officers. So, answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, thank you.
Other question? Yeah, Doc Norton, question.
No. In any military history, there's always a moment, good or bad, that's a change in the battle. And I know Gibby went over it, but just to show you one moment, and I refer to this many times when we talk about this. Remember the slide, Gibby, show the slide with Griffith's battle and with Good. No way. The slide should back it up. That one will do. So here's Griffith's battery here, okay? This is a captain, and he's got this battery of tubes of howitzers. And he sees the Confederates coming through, and he's going to turn his guns like this. And this knucklehead, Major Barry, rides up on horseback and more or less says, "What are you doing?" He said, "Major, those are Confederates." He said, "No, they're not. This is your infantry support that's coming to help you." He said, "No, they're Confederates." And then he pulls the, "I'm a major, you're a captain. Do what I tell you to do." So he turns his guns back this way. Who's over here? Stonewall Jackson. Now you think about that. If he had engaged him, killed Stonewall Jackson, and decimated this, and rolled out the flanks, what would happen to the rest of the Civil War? Jackson wouldn't be alive, Jeb Stuart wouldn't be alive, Griffith would be a hero, you know, and it might have ended, because this was the first real battle of the Civil War. One moment in time where a guy rides up and says, "Turn your guns in." If only. I mean, there are countless World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan situations like that. But you kind of read over and say, geez, okay, Major Barry rides up, he turns the guns. What if that hadn't happened? I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. So, you know, sir.
The whole reason that Ferry made that mistake was the 33rd Virginia was wearing their
Exactly right. See,
blue uniform.
Yeah.
Under John Nash.
So, I mean, to Barry's credit, if you would, he sees blue and he thinks this is federal support. I don't know how Griffith's battery knew they were Confederates. You know, that part is never explained. But it's just one of those moments in time where if things had been different, it might have been a tremendously different outcome. Any other questions? I know we've gone on probably way beyond our time.
It's
Sure.
more of a comment than anything else. I've been up to the Marine Museum up in Quantico,
Right.
and I strongly recommend anybody go there because it's fantastic.
Well, thanks. You know, I told you about the sledgehammers being used to knock off the hinges? The sledgehammer head is on display there at the museum, as are the battle colors. And that individual that gave it to the museum used it as a doorstop in his house. And I think, holy cow. So there again, if someone had said, what's this? Oh, it's an old sledgehammer head, let's throw it away and get a new one.
It's big. and it's heavy.
Yeah, it is.
I was
mean, it's
shocked.
like
You
this.
say, you think sledgehammers, at the, some like sledgehammers aren't, because those are big, thick wooden doors on a firehouse. In modern day sledgehammers, you know, about like this. The thing is, Matt, it's like that big. It's just heavy as all get.
So that's pretty much the presentation as to, you know, it's kind of a drink of water through a fire hose, but sir.
I had one question exactly on that same slide you just jumped from.
Oh.
Back to the Marines, yeah, that one right there.
Yes, sir.
That whole discovery of searching Conrad's, like that was discovered by Dave Sullivan when he wrote his 5-part history,
Right.
Civil War history of the Marines.
Big, thick books, right?
And Conrad had actually served in the Navy, I believe, before, so he knew what a Marine uniform looked like. And that had been a big point of controversy, because up until that came out, the official, like you're saying, the official Marine Corps take on First Manassas was, let's not think about that, the first Bull Run, you know, because then besides Harris's statement, you also then had Zeeland's account, and Zeeland said he was so disgusted with the Marines that he was using his sword cutting weeds along the turnpike to get back. And it really wasn't until the research that Dave Sullivan came up with exactly that, those green pines, and caused the whole history of museums division to start looking back at it. Tom started looking at it and said, yeah, there's more to the story than had been told for the previous 100+ years.
Well, that's why we looked at it and said, let's write a book and kind of not change history, but show what we've discovered. Because you look at the maps, and when it would show the Marine positions, the maps, and you turn page after page, they never moved. And that's not true.
Yeah,
They moved all over the
most part
battlefield.
here.
So, I think we tried to show that.
Yeah, they're mostly listed as being up
And then to
here.
come back as a solitary unit. Remember now, it was close to what, 92% of the Marines on the battlefield had only been in the Marine Corps for 3 weeks. Some of them never held a musket before. And they didn't have a pack, they had a blanket roll and like a canteen cup. And it was like, we're traveling light, you know, because they thought this'll be over, you know, the story about people riding out to Manassas in wagons and having picnics and watching things until the firing started. They thought, you know, this might not be a good place to have a picnic. Let's get out of here. But that was the mentality at the time. Sir?
What you just described showed some very colorful uniforms, the Marine uniforms, and of course the Zouaves, in their
Red?
very
Yeah.
peculiar looking uniforms.
Well, they modeled themselves after the French or the German or the English, but your young son is out there with big white leather straps and a brass breastplate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an inviting target for a rifleman at 200 yards. So, I mean, there's so much to it, but that's the fun part of reading about it and unveiling that onion to show what really goes on. You know, some poor kid gets up there and says, let's go up and see where the artillery fire's coming in, gets his head blown off, and then cut in half along with a sergeant that ultimately dies as well. What do you think you're thinking when your son, who is 18 years old, sees his company commander decapitated in the heat of battle? You know, drop my weapon and run for it? I mean, they had 14 Marines that disappeared, you know, no telling where they went. But you can imagine, some people said, I'm out of here, you know.
Just probably showed us the first of what became an overall theme of the Civil War, in that weaponry got so far ahead of tactics. And we're talking about that person walking into that situation and not realizing how good the gun is.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Sir?
So do I understand then that after the Battle of First Manassas, the Marines basically did not do any more land battles?
That's correct. They were designed to be on board ship and maintain coastal artillery batteries. I think probably Spanish-American War, that period they started to form. Back then they had numbered companies. In World War I, you look at the companies, they weren't Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta Company. They were 57, 27, 36 company. I mean, we could go on and on and on. How many of you have been to downtown Quantico? Okay, so you go down Potomac and Broadway, right at that intersection. That building on the right, that gray building that's 3 stories high, that was headquarters Marine Corps for the United States Marine Corps in World War I.
Oh, wow.
And you will have pictures, and we have them, of Marines walking down the street, right down towards the marina, getting on board ship, and then headed off to France. I mean, Quantico, all the training took place behind the barber shop. And where Gibby and I were working over there, right on the, as you were, the southern side of Quantico. It wasn't on the opposite side. 95 didn't exist, you know. But it's amazing to look at these photographs, how things evolved. And if anyone can speak to it, Ken can, because he was a curator for the museum there at Quantico for a number of years. So he knows that history very, very well. So, any other questions or comments or? My pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was very informative, and they do have some of their books over here for sale, so you can see them on your way out. And there are 2, and this is one of them, 2 that are actually free. And this is the Confederate Corps of Marines. Who knew? But anyway, I will put this over here because I don't want to be like, but anyway, that'll be over there. And so there are actually 2 books. Only one copy of one book, but then multiple copies. So thank you very much. Please remember the August 11th special Zoom presentation, and then also the August 26th regular meeting here. Are there any, is there any new business that anyone wants to mention now? Okay, well, thank you very much for attending. We'll see you next time. Before you go, please remember to visit our website often, civilwarstudygroup.org. We make every attempt on a regular basis to provide informative content. Thank you for visiting, and God bless.